on morphosyntax. This lecture will be very different from the previous ones in the sense that it will be a practical lecture, i.e. I would like to convince you that you absolutely need to practice your syntax before you can actually grasp the concepts that are in fact presented in the lecture part, in the theory part. In other words, that it's no use to simply read and learn even by heart all these concepts if you don't give yourself the chance to actually practice them. So I would urge you to take the time to practice them. I will in fact do that with you now, but I will always show you how to do the thing, but then leave some exercise for you to do on your own. And again, I stress the importance of your doing them at home. Now we will be doing exercises on first category identification, that is identifying what categories are, the parts of speech and so on. That is the starting point. When we want to represent a string, we will have first to identify the elements that make it up, nouns, verbs, adjectives and so on. Some students may sometimes be confused with the particular grammatical status of some words. Then we will have exercises that somehow look at category, subcategorization properties. That is, what native speakers of English say know intuitively about the relationships that hold between a particular lexical items and their complements, what types they are. And then we will reinterpret that in terms of X-bar theory structure, X-bar schema, i.e. spec-head complement relationships. And lastly, we'll look at some tree building operations, how we build trees, and then constituency tests. Essentially, getting practice in what has been presented in the previous lectures. Now, starting with exercise number 1, some of the sentences below are ungrammatical. Okay, can you figure out what makes them ungrammatical? Let's start with number 1. The instructor told the students to study. And then this, this sounds correct. And the instructor suggested the students to study. Now you accept that it is incorrect. You don't have to question that. That's his native speaker judgment. It's not ours. Now, for some reason, the second sentence, the instructor suggested to the students to study, is not correct. Well, how can it be corrected? That is the big question. In other words, we could explain, can you figure out what makes them ungrammatical? We could say that B is bad, is not grammatical, for all kinds of reasons. But we could say, for instance, that suggested, the complement of suggest needs something like suggested to the students, okay? That's to start with. That is, he suggested to the students to study. In other words, that the complement, the first complement of the verb to suggest is in fact a PP, exactly like told. Now, is unlike told, not like. The instructor told the students to study, okay? Whereas the instructor suggested to the students something, namely to study. Now, the customer asked for a hot chocolate. The customer requested for a hot chocolate. Now, as you can see, semantically, told the students, suggested to the students, are very close to each other in terms of meaning. But yet, in terms of syntax, they don't seem to behave in the same way, meaning that somehow there is some information at the syntax level that has to be associated with the verb to suggest, and there is some information that has to be associated with told. Okay? In the same way with the request. Ask and request seem to be like in terms of meaning pretty much the same, but somehow in terms of syntactic behavior, they don't seem to be the same. One is okay, asked for a hot chocolate, but requested for a hot chocolate doesn't work. How can we correct it? Well, simply the customer requested a hot chocolate without the for. Now, well, how do we do that? Where do we capture that? Okay? In what part of the grammar? Well, the part of the grammar where we capture that, that is, how do native speakers know that? Well, it seems that when they know how to use the verb tell or the verb suggest or the verb ask or request, they also associate them with a particular syntactic component that is often represented like this. If you take, for instance, asked, it was asked and requested. And we saw that the verb to ask, when used, it is followed by, ask for a hot chocolate, followed by a PP. And that PP cannot be in a PP, it is a PP with a for as a head. Okay? Now, we represent it as like this. Ask is a verb. When used, the dash here is for the place of the verb. It must be followed by a PP. In other words, we create the complement of it is a PP. Request, again, it is a verb. Okay? So when it is used like that, but it requested something directly. A noun phrase. Okay? You don't use a for. There is no for he requested for a hot chocolate. He requested a hot chocolate. Okay? Now, this information is known as, in at least previous frames of previous stage of the grammar, as sub-categorization frame. In other words, this information, the category verb must take a PP as a complement, so it sub-categorizes for a PP as a complement. And the verb request sub-categorizes for an NP as a complement. Okay? Now, the sub-categorization frames is essentially syntactic information that is part of the lexical entry in the mental lexicon of native speakers. The lexicon consists of a set of words, some of which are going to be our verbs ask and request and other words, and we will have in it sound information that has to do with the pronunciation, syntactic information, so phonological information, syntactic information that has to do with subcategorization, what elements go with it, and the meaning of course, semantic information, what it means. So a lexical entry for any given word of English will consist of 3 types of information. Phonological, essentially the pronunciation, ask, in American English ask, okay, and request, again. Then the syntactic information that goes with it, the head ask or the head request, what does it require as a complement, and the semantics of it, that is the meaning of it. Okay? Now, I leave you to do the rest. You have here other examples. The pilot landed the plane, the pilot landed the journal. Sorry, there is a little error there. I have to be corrected. The pilot landed the plane and the plane landed. These are okay. A journalist wrote the article. The article wrote. This is not correct. And Jerome is tired of her job, and Jerome is satisfied of her job, which is not correct. What is normally said is Jerome is satisfied with her job. Now, moving to exercise 2, indicate the category of each word in the following sentences. Now, this is again a little exercise in category type. Looking at A, the glass broke. What is the category type of the? Is it a noun, a verb, an adjective? Well, the is a specifier for noun, and it is therefore a determiner. A glass. Glass is a noun, and the two together, the glass, function as a noun phrase subject for the verb broke. The glass broke. These tall trees are blocking the road. These. Now this again seems to be specifying the word trees. In fact, not just trees, but tall trees, with a tall being an adjective for trees. So these is a determiner, a demonstrative, in the plural. And tall is somehow telling us how the trees are. They are tall. So it is modifying trees. It's an adjective. A modifier of a noun is the adjective. Are is an auxiliary. It is used to introduce the progressive form for the verb to block. And block is inflected for progressive. So blocking, it's a verb. And then the is again determiner, article determiner, function determiner. And road is a head noun. Notice that we have to be careful about this. There is a little confusion that may arise with respect to the terms that are used in X-bar theory. We have said that in X-bar theory you have the specifier, the head, X0, and then the complement. Now I would like to draw to your attention that there is a little complication with this X-bar schema, to the extent that X-bar XP, which we said could be anything, P adverb, and we have added now I for the clause level. Okay? I would like now to concentrate on the specifier and complement. Specifier is not a category. It's not a noun or a verb. Specifier is a function. In other words, how does this category that we have here, for instance, the, if I use the is an article. In terms of form, it is an article. But in terms of function, it functions as a determiner. So when we say specifier, somehow the term is confusing. It's actually representing the function more than the category, strictly speaking. The category is article, for the, but the function is determiner, and it functions therefore as specifier. Same thing with complement. A complement is again a function, but the element that can realize the complement for X could be either a noun phrase, or a prepositional phrase, or an adjective phrase, or an adverb phrase. And we will see later that even clauses, IPs, and what we will call later CPs, complementizer phrases, can function as a complement. So complement is a function, not a category. So it would be more correct to say, here we have a category ZP, and here we have a category YP, the function of which is complement, and the function of which is specifier. Okay? So one has to be careful with this terminology, which can be sometimes confusing. Remember that when we characterize language, we can characterize it in terms of form or in terms of function. Why did it go like that? Or in terms of function. Okay? Right. Now, I leave you again to do the C, D, E, and F. You use any grammar book that you may have from your previous classes, from your rules and systems class, or from even your AZAR book, grammar book, and you will find all of these if you don't know one of them. But please make sure you do learn what these stand for. The peaches never appear quite ripe. For that one, we have seen most of the elements. The article, and an article is a determiner for us, therefore a specifier. For the noun peaches, never appear, the verb to appear is now specified by never, a negative adverb, and the adjective ripe is specified by the degree adverb quite. Okay, so quite ripe, never appear, quite ripe is the whole VP, and the peaches is the noun phrase. I leave you to do the rest, okay? Exercise 3, each of the following phrases consists of a specifier and a head. This is easy. Build a tree for each one of these, complying with the X-bar schema. Okay, now it's like the zoo or so witty. I will do these two for you. Okay, now the zoo, we first write it, and then structure building, that is in terms of merge operation, first identify the head. Here we are. Then the X-bar schema tells us once you have your head, automatically go to NP via N bar. This is automatic. You don't have even to think about it. NP. Okay? A noun gives its name to its projection. So noun, automatically NP. Do we have a complement? No. Nothing. Do we have a specifier? Yes. It is the determiner, the. Again, like I said, determiner is a cover term to include all kinds of things. Articles, quantifiers, and of course demonstratives, possessives, and even maybe numerals of kinds, okay? Now this is a cover term, that stands for all those, but their function is to specify the head noun, to determine it in some ways. This noun seems to be like it's not taking a complement. I went to the zoo. I don't have to say anything about it or complete the idea. Okay, now the other one was quite witty, I think, if I remember. Quite witty. First you start with the head. Where is my head? Is it quite or is it witty? If I say he is quite witty, could I have said something like he's quite? Quite, that's not English, it doesn't mean anything. Quite has to go with something. It's somehow a functor, it has to go. Now, witty is an adjective. It is the one that will give me my AP, my phrase. Is there an A bar? Well, no, there is nothing. It applies vacuously. There is nothing for that one. But then this element, how does it relate to witty? It seems to be, again, specifying. The specifier is a degree expression. Okay? Well, I've done these two for you. You can try the rest. Right. Now, exercise number 4, each of the following phrases consists of a head and a complement. We have looked at head plus specifier. Now we look at head plus complement. Okay. Into the zoo. Where did he go? Well, he went into the zoo. Okay. And this paper is full of mistakes. Okay. Now let's do those two. Into the zoo. Again, the same story. Remember, merge operation says you begin from the right up. Okay? I look for my head, the head of the construction. Into the zoo is clearly a prepositional phrase, but I can work my way up from the right. Zoo is a noun. The is a determiner. Into is a preposition. How do they combine? If I start from the right, the noun here automatically projects to NP because it's a lexical category in terms of X-bar schema, and it seems to be taken as a specifier, the determiner the. Okay? Now, how does it, as a noun phrase, how does it relate to into? Well, it seems that he went into is not complete, so you need to somehow complete it. Now, the zoo seems a candidate for completing the idea of into. Into what? Notice that complements often answer the question what, or about what, or on what. Okay, so he went into what? Well, it seems like this is functioning as a P-bar for what is a PP that has no spec, it seems. Okay? So the head of the construction is indeed into, which takes as a complement, as you can see, the noun phrase NP. Right. The other one was full of mistakes. I guess full of mistakes will have to be exactly the same. Now, study this material. If I take that, okay, study this material. Again, the same. We first label the words noun, determiner, verb. We start from right to the left. This combines, but before they combine, n bar is provided for us by x bar theory, but there is nothing that functions as a complement, so we go all the way up to np, this being the specifier represented by the determiner. Now, how does the whole string relate to the verb study? That is, this NP that we have created, how does it relate to the verb study? Well, it seems that it is completing the idea. Study what? What do we study? Again, that is the verb in the subcategorization frame. It will have NP in your lexicon. The lexicon will tell you, well, the verb to study must have the verb to study must have an NP as a complement. Therefore, this necessarily is a V-bar. And X-bar schema tells me that once you've created a V-bar, you just project it up to VP. Okay, even if there is no specifier. Right. I hope I have illustrated how you can do some structure building operations with the merge operation. You just practice this. You have to You never know how the questions will be asked. Even though there are multiple choice questions, you can still be asked to identify structures for what they stand for. Now here I have produced just some examples of what you may want, some structures that you may want to remember. For a VP, for instance, that is the exact representation. For a PP, that is the exact representation, as you can see it. In the house, all the details are given and clearly written, not like I do with my handwriting on the board. VP with two complements. Now, put the book on the shelf. When you put something, you can't just say, I put the book. That's not English. You have to finish it. You have to say, I put the book on some place. So this verb seems to take two complements. One is something that can be put, but somewhere, a locative type of complement. Now, how does that translate in tree structure? Look at this V now, put. It takes, at the V bar level, two complements. One NP, the book, and one PP, the locative PP, on the shelf. Okay? So here we are, two complements for the verb to put. We just take that as it is for the time being. Now, more trees. The books about the war. Now, remember that the books about the war, look at the trees, how they are formed. You can see that the direction is from the right to the left. War is a noun. It has a construction, which is a noun phrase, taking the as a determiner. That itself seems to be functioning as a complement for the preposition about, taking, therefore, a prepositional phrase as its higher maximum projection, but it has no specifier. All of it is functioning as, again, a complement for the word books. Books about what? About the war. Okay? So, again, another relation of complementation holding between about the war and the books, and the further projection of books about the war to the higher level of NP by generating a specifier. And then you can look at the rest. Quite certain about Mary. In the same way, the head is certain, but we start from the right, Mary about. Where is the head here for the construction about Mary? Well, it seems to be Mary. Mary is the head for the noun phrase Mary. But then for about Mary, clearly the head is about because it takes Mary as a complement. Therefore, it joins it as a complement here. Then the whole PP relates to the adjective, he's quite certain. Okay, you cannot say to someone he's quite certain. You have to add quite certain about what. Now, clearly then that about Mary is answering that question about what. So it is a complement for certain. And then all of that, certain about Mary, is specified by the degree quiet. The rest, again, is just follows automatically. Now, the structure of a simple sentence is like we saw before. John ate the apple. As you can see, the verb to ate is in the past, and that is matched by the feature on tense, which is the head of the clause as a whole. The construction of it is, again, the apple is a noun phrase functioning like a complement for the verb to eat. The VP as a whole has no specifier, and it is a complement for I. So each time you have a verb, then it must be associated with some tense value. So the VP as a whole is, in a way, we will say later in more advanced classes that it is the verb or the VP has to be bound by the tense value. Okay, and then that is the created I bar, which includes now the tense value ate the apple, okay, takes as a specifier John, and there are other reasons again why that John should be sitting there. Now, the syntactic head of I is the abstract morpheme plus past. As a tense morpheme, it must be associated with the verb, and hence the complemented status of the VP. The semantic head of the sentence is the verb to eat. I repeat this idea, that a sentence has, if you like any other constituent, it has a head, which is syntactic, and that is I, which in this case is the tense value, okay? The tense element. But it has a semantic head. What tells me why John should be there as a subject and the apple? It's the verb to eat. Semantically, the verb to eat takes two arguments, a doer and a doee. That is, it takes two elements for it to be satisfied, happy. If I am the verb to eat, you cannot use me unless you have somebody that can eat and something that can be eaten. Okay? So John can eat and the apple can be eaten. Notice that if I change that to something like the chair ate the table, then even though the sentence is from the point of view of grammar perfectly correct, everything is in place, the subject is in the subject, object is the object, and the verb is in the past, but still it doesn't work semantically. It is somehow ill-formed semantically. Can the chair be doing the act of eating, okay, a table? It's impossible. So again, in this sense, the verb is the semantic head of the clause because it tells you what should be there in the clause semantically. But without the tense element, John eat the apple, that's not English. You have to add the tense value. Either John eats apples every day, or something like John ate the apple this morning, or something like that. So you need a tense value. Okay. Now, IP structure, when we develop it, when we expand it, okay, it will stop here. But then we know with some verbs like know, the structure can be extended to a complement clause, an entire IP as a clause. Now, that we will see with complement clauses. I will give it to you as some kind of as a foretaste of what is to come in the next lecture, which is complement structures. Now, this entire clause, the coach knows what? He knows that the team will win. He knows whether the team will win. He knows if the team will win. All of those elements that, whether if, seem to be introducing the sentence, the team will win, okay, as a complement for structure for the verb to know. In other words, the coach knows something. What is it that this thing that he knows? Well, he knows that the team will win. Now, how do we represent that? Well, the team will win, we know how to represent it. It's an IP. It is a clause. So the same story. The tense element is the head, and the VP is the complement for that head, and the specifier for that head is going to be NP. Now, later on, we will argue that these elements introduce phrases that we will call complementizer phrases, that is, bearing the name of these elements, which are complementizers, that they introduce complement clauses. Okay, now the next exercise, use at least two tests to show that the constituent status of the following bracketed strings. Now, if I take, we ate our lunch near the river. Near the river, okay, could be said to be a constituent, a PP, a PP constituent, because it can satisfy at least two of the tests that we have seen. One of them was substitution test, that is, replace the entire string by means of one word. Well, we ate our lunch here, near the river bank, or we ate our lunch there, near the river bank. So here or there can replace the entire string. Clearly this PP then is a locative adverb of some sort. Then we could also possibly move them as one group of words in one go. Near the river bank, we ate our lunch, fronted to the front. We could possibly even question them. Where did you eat your lunch? Near the river bank. The answer, near the river bank. So where, as a question word, seems to take the whole string, near the river bank, as a question word. Now, if I look at number 2, the computer was very expensive. Now, the bracketed words are computer was and very. Now, computer was and very, how can I possibly substitute them, substitute for them with one particular word? computer is a noun, was is the auxiliary, very is a degree expression. Very normally goes with expensive. It should have been grouped with expensive, but it's not, because now it seems to be grouped with was and computer. And computer normally should be grouped with the. Then there's the term, but it seems to be. Now, have we created something natural? That is the grouping. Is it natural? It doesn't look like one. How do we know that? Well, try the movement test. If indeed computer, was, very is a constituent of some sort, whatever that sort, whatever type, then it should be able to move as one group of words. Now let's try and do it. Computer was very. The, expensive. I have moved it to the front. Computer was very. The, expensive. Clearly this is not English. That shows that the group of words made up of computer, was and very cannot be grouped together, because we saw before that when you could move a constituent that is a real constituent, PP, then the near the river bank can be moved together to the front. Near the river bank, we ate our lunch, perfect English. The other one, it doesn't work. So I leave you to do number 3 on your own. Now, the last exercise says provide a syntactic representation of the following for the following NPs. Justify the complement or modifier status of each of the NP internal PPs. Okay, justify the complement or modifier status of each of the NP internal PPs. Now, there are several PPs. A specialist in fiber optics from Paris. The girl on stage in jeans. On stage in jeans. In fiber optics from Paris. The failure of the program in recent years. Now, each of these PPs, okay, has a particular status. One of them is they can either be complements or they can be modifiers. What distinguishes complements from modifiers? Well, one particular thing is that complements are somehow completing the meaning of the head that they go with. But modifiers, they are not necessary for the head. They can be used just like they can be possibly not used. In other words, complements are obligatory for the head, but modifiers are optional. If I look at the first NP, a specialist in fiber optics from Paris. Now, I'm talking about a specialist, but in what? In fiber optics. Where is he from? From Paris. Now, what is necessary? Okay, if I say I met a specialist from Paris, I met a specialist from Paris, what do you think the hero would ask me? A specialist in what? In other words, I don't know who you are talking about. But if I tell him I met a specialist in fiber optics from Paris, then the string becomes acceptable. In other words, it is complete. Now, in fiber optics seems to relate to the head specialist more closely as far as meaning goes than from Paris. Indeed, if you are a native speaker of English, you would not accept that from Paris sits in place of in fiber optics. In other words, a specialist from Paris in fiber optics is not English. Why? Because the PP from Paris, which is the modifier, has come closer to specialist. Let me show that in a tree diagram. Now, a specialist in fiber optics from Paris. Okay? If I look at the expression as a whole, if I do my trees, then let me do it fairly quickly. Paris is an NP, and it is a complement for that preposition from, so this is a PP. Okay? And then in fiber optics is again another NP, which is a complement for a P as a PP. Now the issue is, how do these, how do they, these two PPs, somehow relate to the head noun here, which of the two is the complement and which is the modifier? Now we have defined complements already as units that complete the meaning of the head. Without them the head is not complete, and I showed to you that I met a specialist from Paris. If I don't have in fiber optics, somehow the string is incomplete. Then you have to ask me, specialist in what? Notice it answers the question what again. Okay? Now, the what type of question is really about he specializes in, you can even paraphrase it, he specializes in fiber optics and he is from Paris. Okay? Now, specializes in fiber optics, meaning essentially the same as specialist in fiber optics, therefore this is clearly a complement. How about this one? Is it a complement? Well, clearly not. If it were a complement, it would be about the area in which he specializes in. But in fact, he's not. This is not Paris, it's a location. It's a city. So he comes from Paris. This is, in fact, an added piece of information. I could actually delete it. I'm a specialist in fiber optics. I don't have to tell you that he's from Paris or from Italy, from, I don't know, Barcelona or whatever. Okay? So clearly, this is an added piece of information. We'll put it now there. We will say that modifiers are somewhere there. Now, I told you that if something is a modifier and we place it here, it doesn't work. A specialist from Paris in fiber optics is not English. A specialist from Paris in fiber optics is not English. Accept it from me, even if you don't have any intuition for that. Okay? Now, a specialist from Paris in fiber optics is not correct. Why? But notice that if I take this one and I generate it in between the two, that means I would do that. This PP would come here, in between the two. Now, in syntax, we call this crossing of branches. Branches cannot cross each other. Branches never cross each other. Okay? We call this crossing of branches. In fact, crossing branches, there is a principle that says no crossing of branches. You cannot possibly accept a structure where elements seem to cross. If this modifier is generated here, it would be sitting in between the noun and its complement PP, therefore crossing like that. Okay? Right. You do the same for number 2. Then you ask yourself, the noun girl, does it need to be completed? Okay? If I say something like, I met a girl this morning, or a girl came to me this morning, do I have to talk about on stage in jeans? It seems like these elements are more or less modifying, none of which is actually a complement of any sort. The girl who is on stage and who is wearing jeans and who is in jeans. Reduce relative clauses to produce something like the girl on stage in jeans. You do the rest on your own. The same thing with the failure of the program in recent years. Now, an of type of PP often is a complement. The failure of the program, the failure, what failure of the program, when in recent years, a time adverbial PP. Now, one of them is complement, one of them is a modifier. You do that on your own. Thank you very much. That was the end of today's lecture.